All right, so let's talk about bracket changes. So how do I set them up and what are they actually all about? Okay, so first I'm going to go to my setup, and from setup, I'm going to go to bracket changes. And then from there, I can create my own, but for the most part, I think you'll probably just want to add the default actions. So I'm going to add my default actions, and then we're going to talk about what those are. Okay. As we add these default actions, we have some pre-built actions inside of the system that kind of dictate and kind of tell you exactly what it would do in certain scenarios from a bracket change perspective. A lot of times it's exactly the steps you as an event admin might take in the event that these things happen. And so we kind of pre-built them so you can do it in one click of a button. Okay. So if we have built we have brackets built, but there is no bout saved, and then we're going to add a person to the weight class or a team to the duel, then what I would see is we would rebuild the bracket. We're going to change the bracket type if needed. So if it was a 3-man round robin and now we added somebody, we would change it to a 4-man round robin, that sort of thing. What are we going to do with the seeds? So we're going to preserve those seeds so that if you had seeds in there, we're going to keep those seeds. We're going to redraw anyone that was unseeded, and then we're going to freeze and renumber the bout numbers. So that's kind of your typical steps that you would take if you were adding someone to a bracket after the bracket was already built. Okay. The second thing here is to build, but no bouts have been saved. Okay. So if it's built, no bouts have been saved, but we have a bracket type change. So hey, we went from a 16 to a 32-man bracket for some reason, or from an 8-man to a 16-man, whatever. It's going to rebuild the bracket. It's going to preserve the seeds. It's going to unseed. It's going to preserve the unseeded ones, and it's going to freeze and renumber as well. Okay. This would also work if you had a bracket type change. Say that you had 4 guys in a bracket. Now you're going to go down to a 3-man round robin because you took somebody out, that sort of thing. Okay. Now that kind of leads into the next one, which is we've got brackets built and no bouts are saved, and we remove somebody from the bracket. Okay. What's it going to do? It's going to rebuild the bracket. It's going to go ahead and check and see if it needs to change the bracket type. And if it does, it will. It'll shift the seeds so that if you pulled a seed out, it'll move all the seeds up, that sort of thing. It's going to redraw the unseeded, and then it's going to freeze and renumber the bracket. Okay. So then you start getting, okay, so that's if we added and removed and the brackets were built, but no bouts were saved. But then what about that crazy scenario where you wrestle the first couple of bouts in a bracket, or you wrestle the first round, and now somebody shows up and says, hey, I didn't get to wrestle. What are you going to do with me, right? So that is the built, but brackets, but bouts are saved. Okay. If we're adding someone, it's going to preserve that bracket. It's going to put them in the place of a forfeit, and then it's going to freeze and renumber that bracket for you. Okay. Now, what if the bracket type changed? Because we went from a 16-man, we added a 17th guy, and now we're in a 32. Okay. If that bracket changes, we're going to preserve the bracket, and then we're going to renumber the bouts. Okay. So you have to do that manually, because when we add that extra bout in, you're going to say, hey, I may want that to be a 100, 100A, 100.1 bout. It's going to ask you to renumber those. Okay. Now, built and bouts are saved, and we remove someone, it's going to preserve the bracket. It's going to replace that person with a forfeit, and then it's going to freeze and renumber the bracket. So that's your typical way that those things are going to happen within your tournament, just using your bracket changes. Okay. But you can always check your bracket changes as you add them by default. We're actually working on some different things now to preserve bouts if they've already wrestled, all that sort of stuff, so you can keep the head-to-heads and that sort of stuff. So just keep on the lookout for bracket changes, but these are pretty common things that tasks you would use as a event admin in order to keep your brackets from going when you have a bracket built and you need to do changes.